Has that mask been a symbol of shame, or was that something to protect yourself from the outside world whenever you go in these matches, as it happens?
Oof, that's a great question. And to be honest with you, I don't know if I've ever answered that, but I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think as soon as I put the mask on, those first few showings, I think we're out of shame. I didn't want people to see me. I didn't want the fans to laugh and ridicule how hideous I'd become. But more importantly, as I kept going and as I slowly started to build my confidence, it was out of, these people didn't deserve it. These people did not get to enjoy me while I didn't have the mask. And now with it, they didn't deserve that at all. And so it definitely did become a place of hiding it for the sake of hiding.
So in our next episode, now I finally got a name. It's going to be called In Gear. And this week, we're going to have Danny King on the episode. We talk about his ring gear. So how are you today?
Doing great. How are you?
Good. So let's talk at the beginning. And do you remember what your gear was when you first started training? What was your very first ring gear, if you can remember?
The very first gear I ever wore were these bell-bottom, flashy, very bright, disco-y, glittery gear. I had two versions, I believe. I had a baby blue version, and then eventually it morphed into the purple version.
And what was your thought process on your starting gear?
On my starting gear, I needed something that captured the energy and aura that I had when I was on stage performing, and I needed to translate that to when I was wrestling inside the ring. And I think those specific two gears encapsulated everything that Danny King was about.
And I'm curious, especially, and a lot of it was that like your very first color scheme choice when you started?
Yeah, it very much was. It started with royal blue, and once I started teaming with Kr'eme, it morphed into the purple, and now that's kind of the colors we rotate with a lot of the time for the training season.
Yeah, and I was going to talk about that too. How did the color scheme change? That now that you're teaming up with Kr'eme and with the Dream Team, like how did that evolve from your beginning gear coming into that formation with that team with the Dream Team?
The best way I can put it is that Kr'eme describes the color purple as royalty. It describes it as elegance and power and all of these things. And when the Dream Team formed and Danny King and Kr'eme, joined together, I think we definitely described all of those features. And so it made all the sense in the world to do purple, to do, baby blue, to do all of these bright, flashy colors that captures your eye every single time we go out there.
No, and I saw some matches over at Inspire, and I noticed there was a lot of pop star elements with your getup. Like, were there any music groups or artists that you kind of looked up to forming into the gear that you have?
Yeah, totally. Growing up, I was a big fan of Danny King, and when I got older, I just kept listening to so much Danny King. And so I think if you had to ask me who my favorite artist was, I think I would just go look in a mirror and say it was me. And so I think I definitely take a lot of inspiration from myself.
Okay. That's very meta of you, but I see where you're going with that. And I'm sure that every gear that you have, I'm sure there were mishaps. If you don't have any, God bless you, first of all. But I'm sure as you're starting to wrestle, what were some malfunctions that you come across? And if it's perfect, hey, I have nothing against it. But like, what were some things that you've learned as you started to have your gear together?
As I started with my gear, I don't believe I had any mishaps. I have the best gear makers in the world. I think they definitely made sure no mishaps happened. I think later on in my career, I learned that I needed to get gear that was able to get blood out. And that was a reoccurring problem that I kept having. But early on in the stages, I had no issues with any of my gear.
Yeah, and it's interesting so you never had mishaps. I'm very, very curious. So the gear that you've changed over the years, it's perfect, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely, because I've ran through my mind a lot. I needed something to be able to perform in, something, if I was jumping off the ropes or if I was, wrestling 10 plus minutes, I needed to make sure that it was going to last. It needed to be stable material. And so my gear makers, I definitely made sure to make sure that all of it was perfect for when I was going out.
I was thinking about this too, and you've had your own evolution as a wrestler, and there was a match that I had in mind where that evolution changed. And one thing that came out of it was the mask. And if you want to share that, how did that change your, not only to who you are as Danny King, but to the gear that you have?
Oof, okay. That's a touchy subject, but I can dive into that one a little bit. So the mask, I went through a tragedy. I went through an incident back at Watch the Throne for New Texas Pro. We main evented TLC against the Eighth Day in Culture Shock, and it was halfway through that match that I bust my eye. My eye was swollen shut immediately. Immediately, as soon as I felt contact, I couldn't see out of my right eye, and I wrestled the whole match with one eye. Um, and after that, it was tragedy. It was miserable. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. No, none of my agents were answering my calls. All of my fans were kind of slowly disappearing at the time, and it was rough.
Oh,
And I felt that I needed something to hide my scars, to hide my damage. Because believe it or not, this is the moneymaker. This is what people come to see and pay money for. And so for that to be taken away from me, I needed something to really make sure that I couldn't be seen, I suppose. And I have the best contacts in the world, and luckily through them, I was able to construct the perfect way to continue wrestling to help pay my bills and still, be able to be locked in and get my revenge of what I needed to at that moment. I think that's where the mask came from, of course. I think that's where that started. And I think as it morphed into my descent in madness with all of that, it kind of created its own layer. A lot of that time frame is fuzzy. I won't lie to you, in terms of my thought process in that exact moment. But I do certainly remember that I was trying to find anything that would cover my face, which is why I brought in the towels, as I made my entrances. Eventually, I brought in a scarf. I very much was going out of my way to hide my face from these people because at that time they didn't deserve to see that.
and I'm curious, as I was watching it, this is from my perspective, so it may change when I ask this question to you. Has that mask been a symbol of shame, or was that something to protect yourself from the outside world whenever you go in these matches, as it happens?
Oof, that's a great question. And to be honest with you, I don't know if I've ever answered that, but I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think as soon as I put the mask on those first few showings, I think we're out of shame. I didn't want people to see. I didn't want the fans to laugh and ridicule how hideous I'd become. But more importantly, as I kept going and as I slowly started to build my confidence, it was out of, these people didn't deserve it. These people did not get to enjoy me while I didn't have the mask. And now with it, they didn't deserve that at all. And so it definitely did become a place of hiding it for the sake of hiding.
And now that you've had these changes over the years with your ring gear, and especially teaming up with Casey and now with Steven, like how did that morph even further, with not only the mask but the further additions that you have in the gear? How has that partnership with you craft into the gear that you have going forward?
Well, in terms of Casey Kareem and the Dream Team, I think, a big part of the Dream Team is that we're exotic, we're flashy, we're larger than life superstars, and I think it represents that when we come out in our gear, the tassels, the bright colors, the logos, everything. I think that's a very big role in who we are as people. And our gear maker, Mac, is one of the best gear makers in Texas. I think we came to him with a vision, and he knew exactly what we meant, and we trusted him. And that's exactly where our gear came from. In terms of when we joined with Stephen Wolf in the pack, he's the world champ. You're rocking with the world heavyweight champion here. And at that point, gear is essential. Nice gear, TV quality gear is essential when you're rolling with the pack. And our second gear lady, named Lucha Lady, did a perfect, wonderful job on our pack gear. And it's the pink and the teal and very bedazzled gear that we have currently right now. I think as we cross these levels, as we reach these milestones, I think it's only important to represent these milestones with what we're wearing. And I think the Dream Team's gear has done such a great job of doing that.
What I noticed too is with a lot of the matches that you have, and what were some normal things that you notice, whether it's normal wear and tear that needed to be improved as you started to learn more things? Like, for example, you need gear that can take in a lot of blood, because blood is not a very thin substance. Like, what were some of those improvements that you noticed as you started to get that gear going? And going back to the prior question, like, how did the pack and the Dream Team kind of meld into that?
As I realized that we were getting nicer and nicer gear, I think we needed something to be comfortable in. We needed something that we could have confidence in. And I think as we wrestled, we learned a lot about how we needed to move around in the ring. The Dream Team has certain style, and I think that style needs to be encapsulated. When I jump up in the air and you see the tassels fly, you know exactly what time it is, right? And in terms of the pad gear, having the bedazzles, those bedazzles are not cheap. The diamonds that you see on our gear are not cheap, and those fall out a lot. But we have diamonds on diamonds to keep adding to them. We send it back to the gear lady, and she does a wonderful job. That's essential. In terms of blood in our gear, it definitely was a challenge of figuring out, okay, how is this blood going to come out of this gear? And with a few secret remedies, I was able to get that perfectly out. Take it to the dry cleaners, they come back, it's brand new.
And now that I'm thinking about it too, especially now that you have gold on your shoulder in this case, and looking forward to the future of your gear, how has having the pack, having these belts on your waist, how will that really evolve, not only to you guys as wrestlers, but the gear that you're wearing?
I mean, it's been what, 1 week? 1 week with these things, and the way our lives have changed, I can't even put into words. We can skip lines at airports. We don't have to wait for reservations at dinner. Casey Kr'eme is in Colombia right now. It's a great time to be a champion, and it's a great time to be in the pack. And in terms of our gear, we haven't seen anything yet. We have a lot of things coming in the pipelines for the Dream Team, and when you see it, you're just going to look at them and say, these guys, they have it.
And you don't have to give anything away, but what are some things that you're looking forward to now that you have these championship belts? Will the gear be crafted around the belts, or will there be something that would improve not only like the value of the Dream Team and the pack?
I think with our gear, it's always going to evolve, and it's always going to elevate the Dream Team. I think as we get better in the ring, as we get better in everyday life, inside and outside, I think the gear is a big part of that as well. I think appearance and essential. It's key. We walk into a room and you immediately it's the Dream Team as soon as we walk into a room. And I think outfits, wardrobe, gear, all of that plays a huge role in being able to say, hey, I know that guy, or hey, those guys look like stars. And so for the future, I can't wait for it.
It's such a different departure from the mask. And looking back from the mask to now, what is that moment of reflection now that you have the championship belts and the mask is gone completely? Has that moment of shame changed into who you are? Or is there something that's kind of holding you back still as you have these title belts on your waist?
The short answer to that question is that we got what we wanted out of this. It took 5 months and went through a lot of pain, trauma, and suffering inside and outside the ring. But at the end of the day, we got what we needed. And I think in terms of a more proper answer, I think you just have to watch the Texas Contender Series, because I think it will go into a lot more about how we feel about that.
And I do want to bring this up, and around this time, and I'm sure, and this will be past the date of the showcase, and the showcase will be far behind us, and especially with you, with Casey Kr'eme and with Stephen, like what are you looking forward to now that you have this gear that you have currently coming into the Indie Showcase?
With the gear that we have with the Indie Showcase, we're here to show out. We're here to prove that not only that Texas has the best wrestling going on, but that we're all leading the pack. We're leading the charge. You look at the champions, you look at who's running Texas, who's all over these shows. There's so many great talent right now. So many hot talent right now. And the fact that the Dream Team is in that conversation, you can't beat that. So when we come into Texas Indie Showcase and we have the flashiest gear, we have the best gear, we have stuff that people remember, that's everything,
All right. And for you, at least, I know a lot of the questions and the gear that you have is centered around you. Like, do you have anyone else that you have for inspiration for gear?
In terms of inspiration in gear, no. I think I have a very solid base at home. I think my friends, the people that I party with, Casey Kr'eme. If anything, I think I take a lot of inspiration from Casey Kr'eme than anyone else. People don't understand that when me and Casey Kr'eme are flying around the world and we're partying, we have these conversations. We talk about what goes into our look. We talk about what's in right now in terms of fashion. And that is why we're able to remain relevant. That's why we're able to remain on top of how we dress and how we look and how we present ourselves. And I think that's such a key part in knowing who you are as a person, right? Because that's the first impression that anyone sees. They see how you're dressed, they see how you look, and they think, okay, I know this guy's story. I know what this guy's about, just on the way he came into this room, on the way he looks and the way he dresses. And I think me and Casey Kr'eme very much pride ourselves in our wardrobe and how we look whenever we walk into a room.
I want to end this conversation, and thank you so much, Danny King, for having you on. It's been months in the making, and now
I apologize.
I know you're busy with your agents. I know you have a lot of scheduling conflicts. I understand that you have the life in front of you, but now that we're having this time to having this conversation, I want to say thank you first of all for having you on, talking about how great your ring gear is, and it's gone through its phases, honestly. And now that you have the belt on your waist right now with the tag team champions over at New Texas, and now that you've achieved the dream of really going over as a tag team partner, I wanted to give you flowers on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
it means a lot.
I'll end this conversation with everything with the In Gear series right now. What we talked about throughout this entire time. What does your gear say about you?
What does my gear say about me? I think my gear shows that I'm loud, I'm brash, but I have style. I'm cooler than your everyday person. And I think when you look at my gear, it makes you think, wow, there's some part of me deep down that wants to be that guy out there. And I think my gear, the fact that I'm able to do that to all my dreamers out there and everyone watching at home, that makes me sleep just a little bit better at night.
Otherwise, you have the floor. And where can we find you if you have anything upcoming down the line?
You can find me and Casey Kr'eme this month at PWF, at Inspire Pro AD, every other week at Texas Contender Series. You know, I'd like to use this time to shout out Casey Kr'eme of the Dream Team, Stephen Wolf of the Pack, and I'd like to say that I hope Dustin Wind is having a bad day too. I think that's all the time I really need to use for this.
Okay. All right. Awesome. But thank you so much for having you on, and we'll see you on the next episode on the PGTK Podcast, an interview podcast.